Multilingual people have different personalities in every language they speak. That's 100% not true. In this video, I want to prove to you why this whole theory that people who speak more than one language have different personalities is 100% false. Okay, so here's why it's not true that when you learn another language, you have a different personality. What you learn when you learn another language is how to communicate effectively with the people you've interacted with. And if you think about it, you also learn to do this all the time in your first language. I mean, someone please convince me that the way you talk to your grandma is the same as the way you talk to your boss. It's not. Depending on what context we find ourselves, we as humans adapt how we talk and what we say and how we say it. We do this all the time in our native language without even noticing. So what happens when you learn another language is the same thing. But then, of course, there are differences in how you interact with people simply because people from another culture are different from people from your own culture. It's not that you develop a completely new personality. It's just that you find ways that are more effective for you to produce the same results you want in the other language. One example I have of that is Brazilian Portuguese, which is my first language. So in Brazilian Portuguese, we express politeness using our tone of voice. So if I want to ask for a water in a restaurant, I will say, me dá uma água. Na, 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 na. That sounds polite, even though I'm saying give me in Portuguese. In English, if I say give me a water, it will sound rude because I'm using the imperative form. So what I did is, because I wanted to continue expressing the same thing, which is politeness, I learned that I should use can I have and add please to every request. The fact that I cared enough to learn about this cultural aspect means that I am adaptable. It means that I am interested in being polite, and it means I have the exact same personality. I'm just expressing it in another way. So that's my first theory. Another very important thing that we need to consider is that depending on how fluent you are in another language, depending on how confident you are about your skills, you will behave differently. This has more to do with how confident you are about your skills than with your personality. So if you're not that confident in a language, you might come across a little bit more diffident. If you're really, really confident, you could come across as being a bit more arrogant. If you're at a stage where you think you have a lot to learn, you will be more inquisitive with people, but that's not because you've developed a new personality. You still have the same personality. The only thing that's different is what sides of that personality you have that you're exploring. You're not developing a new persona. Another very important point is that when you learn another language, a lot of the time you don't have the same vocabulary, you don't have the same structures from one language. And if you're multilingual, you probably know that a lot of the time you have the perfect way of saying something in French, but unfortunately you're speaking German. How do you cope with that? Well, even though you don't have the exact same structure, you have other ways to express yourself. You have other ways to make your point understood. The fact that the word saudade is a noun which only exists in Portuguese doesn't mean I won't be able to express that same feeling and that same idea by telling people that I miss them um, in English. So in Portuguese we have a noun, and in English we have a verb. I can convey the same meaning. This doesn't mean I have a different personality. Another point is that the way we speak a language and how we communicate has a lot to do with the people we interact with the most. So when you learn a language, the reason why you could come across as you've developed a new personality is because of the people you've interacted with. So if, for example, I learn English and I go to the United States, when I'm communicating in English, I will communicate with Americans. I will learn ways to communicate with them that are effective in that culture. It seems like I have a new personality, but the goals I'm trying to fulfill are quite similar. When I go back to Brazil and I communicate with people in Brazil, I will communicate in a way that's effective for Brazilians. It doesn't mean my personality has changed. All it is you exploring different sides of your personality, or different sides, different aspects of your self-confidence, and the many joys of being able to communicate with many people. Now, what I believe is that once you learn other languages, your personality as a whole changes, simply because once you get to interact with other cultures, there are many things about your own culture that you might question. There are things that you learn which are new, and I believe that makes you a more open-minded person, but I don't believe you are a completely different person in every language. All that happens is you might come across as more timid or more seductive or more diffident because of how you feel about that language, but you're still the exact same person, and whoever came up with the idea is absolutely mental. I'm not 100% sure who came up with that theory, but I think it has to do with just how we carry ourselves. But what's gonna happen is just a difference in how you're communicating, because that's effective for the result that you want to produce. And I believe the way we communicate has a lot more to do with the people we surround ourselves with the environment that we surround ourselves with, than with the words themselves, or with your personality in itself. I don't believe you have a different personality. I believe learning other languages gives you an opportunity to change your whole personality, because once you learn about other cultures, and especially if you have the opportunity to travel to another country, you will learn a lot about yourself, about our country, about your country, about your culture, and you will analyze things differently. But the reason why people who speak multiple languages might come across as changing their personality is simply because when they communicate in each of the languages that they speak, what they're doing is they're showing what they've done in terms of adapting the way they behave to fit in with that culture and be effective as communicators. If you sound different, I believe it has more to do with the fact that you've interacted with a group of people which is different, and therefore you need to behave differently, but your personality, the core of who you are, is the same. You just have a broader range of options on how you behave, on how you expose your ideas, and if you speak multiple languages, you probably know that you also forget words much more often. So don't believe anyone who tells you you're not going to have a different personality because you learned English or Chinese or French. What could happen is simply the way you organize your ideas is different, but your personality, the essence of who you are, will still be the same. What do you think? Do you think you have a different personality for every language you speak?